The judge leaned forward and looked directly at my ex-husband. "Mr. Carter," she said slowly, tapping a folder on the desk, "you abandoned this child for 9 years. And today, you want custody of her earnings." The courtroom went quiet. Mark's lawyer shifted in his chair. Vanessa Caldwell, his wealthy wife, stared at me like I'd ruined something she had already purchased. And in that moment, watching the color drain from Mark's face, I realized something. For the first time in 9 years, he finally understood he had picked the wrong woman to walk away from. But to explain how we got to that courtroom in Kansas City, you have to go back to the day everything fell apart. 9 years earlier. Springfield, Missouri. Emily wasn't even a year old yet. Our house sat on a quiet street just off Glenstone Avenue. Nothing fancy, just a small beige ranch with a cracked driveway and a maple tree that dropped leaves all over the yard every fall. I used to love that tree. The morning Mark left, Emily was sitting on the living room carpet with a stuffed rabbit chewing on its ear the way babies do. She was 10 months old, chubby cheeks, soft brown curls sticking out at the back. Mark stood near the doorway holding a suitcase. At first I thought he was going on a job out of town. He worked construction back then, and it wasn't unusual for him to leave for a few days. But something about his face felt different. Cold. Impatient. I remember saying, "When will you be back?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at Emily sitting on the floor. Then he said something that still echoes in my head. "I don't want that kid." Just like that. No anger, no shouting, just a flat sentence. I thought I had misheard him. "What?" He sighed like I was being difficult. I said, "I don't want the kid, Linda. You can keep her." Emily looked up and smiled at him. He didn't smile back. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my chest. "Mark, what are you talking about?" Then he said the rest of it. "I'm leaving." The woman waiting outside in the car was Vanessa Caldwell. At the time, I only knew a little about her. She owned several apartment buildings in Greene County and had money from a divorce settlement years earlier. She was nearly 20 years older than Mark. But she had something I didn't. Cash. Later, I learned Mark had been seeing her for months. That morning, he walked past the couch, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. "Mark, wait," I said, my voice shaking. "What about Emily?" He stopped in the doorway but didn't turn around. "You'll figure it out." Then he added one more thing before leaving. "I already took the money from the bank account. I'll need it to get started." And then he walked out. Just like that. The silence in the house afterward felt heavy. I remember sitting on the couch holding Emily while the sound of Vanessa's car pulled away from the curb. Emily giggled and grabbed my hair. She had no idea her father had just disappeared from her life. For a while I just sat there staring at the door. Then the panic started creeping in. Our savings. $38,000. Gone. 2 months later, the eviction notice showed up. I still remember the smell of the paper when I opened the envelope at the kitchen table. The landlord was polite about it. He even gave me extra time. But bills don't care about sympathy. I sold whatever I could. The hardest thing was the dining table. It had been a wedding gift from my parents. Solid oak, big enough for family dinners that suddenly weren't happening anymore. A man from Facebook Marketplace came to pick it up. When he carried it out of the house, the kitchen looked strangely empty. Emily sat in her high chair banging a spoon on the tray. I smiled at her like everything was fine. Then I cried in the bathroom after the man drove away. Work became survival. I started working night shifts at Walgreens stocking shelves. Later, I found a better job at a dental clinic on Sunshine Street, answering phones and cleaning instruments. But those early years were exhausting. Some nights I would come home close to midnight, my feet aching, shoulders, stiff eyes burning. Emily would already be asleep. Other nights she would still be awake, sitting on the couch wrapped in a little blanket. "Mommy," she'd run into my arms like I'd been gone for weeks. One night when she was about 4 years old, I came home after a double shift. I must have looked terrible because Emily touched my face and said, "You tired?" I laughed softly. A little. She climbed onto my lap and started singing a small song she had learned at church choir. It wasn't perfect. She forgot half the words, but the way her tiny voice filled the living room, it did something to me. I remember holding her tight and thinking, "We're going to be okay." Springfield is the kind of place where people notice things. Neighbors noticed I was raising Emily alone. Church ladies noticed she could sing. Our music director, Mr. Alvarez, noticed the most. He was a retired music teacher who volunteered at the church on Sundays. After hearing Emily sing during choir practice, he walked up to me one morning and said, "Your daughter has something special." I smiled politely. Every parent hears that at some point. But he kept working with her, teaching her breathing exercises, helping her practice harmonies. By the time Emily was 9, she had started singing at small local events, county fairs, school musicals, a couple of charity concerts. Nothing huge, but enough that people remembered her name. Sometimes she even earned a little money. Not much. Just enough to buy her own microphone and help with groceries now and then. My favorite moments were still the quiet ones. Sunday mornings at church. Emily standing near the front with the choir sunlight coming through the stained glass windows. Her voice rising above the others. Clear. Confident. Beautiful. I would sit in the back pew and wipe tears with the edge of a napkin so nobody noticed. Because I knew something. Every note she sang had been built from the years we survived together. 9 years passed like that. Hard work. Small victories. A peaceful life we slowly rebuilt. And then one afternoon everything changed again. I came home from work and found a certified letter sitting in the mailbox. Official looking. From a law firm in Kansas City. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a custody petition. And at the top of the document was a name I hadn't seen in almost a decade. Mark Carter. My ex-husband. The man who had once said he didn't want that kid. Now suddenly, he wanted to be her father again. And he wasn't coming alone. The first time I saw Mark again, it was in the parking lot of the Price Cutter grocery store on Battlefield Road. It was a Tuesday afternoon, late summer, the kind of Missouri heat that sticks to your skin even after the sun starts dropping behind the trees. I had just finished my shift at the dental clinic and stopped to grab milk and bread before heading home. I pushed my cart out toward the car, and that's when I noticed the black Mercedes SUV parked 2 spaces away. It didn't belong in that parking lot. Springfield has nice areas, sure, but this grocery store mostly sees pickup trucks, minivans, and the occasional dusty sedan. Not luxury SUVs with tinted windows. At first I didn't think anything of it. Then the driver's door opened, and out stepped Mark. For a second I honestly thought my brain had misfired. 9 years changes a person. He looked older, heavier around the middle, the same dark hair but now threaded with gray around the temples. But the walk was unmistakable. That same confident stride like the world owed him something. He spotted me right away. Linda. Just hearing my name in his voice again made my stomach turn. I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding my grocery bag. He smiled like we were old friends bumping into each other. "Wow," he said, "you look good." I stared at him. 9 years. Not a phone call, not a birthday card, not a single dollar of child support. And now he was complimenting my appearance in a grocery store parking lot. "What do you want?" I asked. Straight to the point. He chuckled softly like he appreciated the honesty. "Still the same Linda." Then he glanced toward the passenger side of the SUV. Vanessa wanted to come say hello too. My eyes followed his. And there she was. Vanessa Caldwell. She stepped out slowly, smoothing the sleeve of a cream-colored blazer like she was arriving at a business meeting instead of confronting the woman whose marriage she had helped destroy. She was probably close to 70 now. Tall, elegant, perfectly styled silver hair. The kind of woman who always smells faintly of expensive perfume. Her eyes looked me up and down the way someone might inspect a used car. "Linda," she said politely. Her voice had that calm, practiced tone wealthy people sometimes use. As if every conversation is a negotiation. I nodded once. "What do you want?" I repeated. Mark leaned against the SUV. "We should talk somewhere private." "No," I said, "you can say it right here." A couple nearby were loading groceries into their trunk, but they weren't paying attention. Just another afternoon in a grocery store parking lot. Mark glanced at Vanessa. She gave him a small nod. He took a breath. "Well, this might come as a surprise." "Everything about you is a surprise," I said. He ignored the comment. "You know, Emily's been singing." That caught me off guard. "How do you know that?" He smiled. "Internet exists, Linda." Vanessa added quietly. She has a very rare voice. My hands tightened around the grocery bag. The fact that they had been watching my daughter without my knowledge made my skin crawl. Mark continued. We've been following her performances online, those county fair videos, the church recordings. Vanessa folded her hands together. She has potential. The word sounded wrong in her mouth. Not admiration. Evaluation. Mark pushed himself off the car. Look, Linda, let's just get to the point. He opened the back door of the SUV and pulled out a leather folder. My chest tightened. I had seen that kind of folder before. Lawyers use them. He handed it to me. Go ahead. I didn't want to take it. But curiosity won. Inside were several printed documents, legal paperwork, and a number written in bold near the center of the page. $1,200,000. For a second I thought it was a mistake. Then Mark spoke. We're offering you $1.2 million. My mouth went dry. For what I asked. Vanessa answered before he could. For custody. The word echoed in my head. Custody. Mark stepped closer. Emily deserves better opportunities, Linda. Nashville, real producers, real training. Vanessa nodded slightly. We have connections. I stared at them. You want to buy my daughter? Mark sighed like I was misunderstanding. No, we want to invest in her future. I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. She's not a business. Vanessa tilted her head. With the right management, she could be. I felt something inside me go cold. Mark softened his voice. You've done a great job raising her, honestly. Then he gestured toward the paperwork. But this kind of opportunity doesn't come around often. My hands trembled slightly. $1.2 million. That kind of money could pay for college. A house. Music school. Security I had never been able to give her. For a brief moment, just a moment, my mind started calculating. Mortgage. Debt. Savings. And Mark saw it. His smile widened. See, you're thinking about it. Then he delivered the line that made my stomach twist. You'll never be able to give her the life we can. Silence hung between us. Cars rolled through the parking lot. A shopping cart rattled across the pavement somewhere nearby. Vanessa adjusted her bracelet. We're not unreasonable people, Linda. She said it like she was negotiating a property purchase. We're willing to ensure you're comfortable. Comfortable. Like I was some employee they planned to retire. I closed the folder slowly. Does Emily know about this? Mark shook his head. Not yet. Vanessa smiled faintly. We believe it's best handled by adults first. I handed the folder back. I need time. Mark's eyes lit up. Of course. He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. Call us. Then he added casually, we'll be in town a few days. Vanessa slid back into the SUV. Before Mark closed the door, he looked at me again. You did well with her, Linda. Then he paused. But this is the level where things get serious. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. I stood there for a long time. The grocery bag felt heavy in my hand. That night I barely slept. The number kept flashing in my mind. $1.2 million. I sat at the kitchen table long after Emily went to bed, scribbling numbers on the back of an envelope. Mortgage. College. Music training. For the first time in years, the idea of financial security sat right in front of me. But something about the way Vanessa had said the word potential kept bothering me. It didn't sound like love. It sounded like profit. Around midnight, I stepped outside for air. The summer night was quiet. Crickets in the grass. A distant car passing down the road. Then I heard a voice. Mark's voice. I froze. He was standing near the end of the driveway talking on his phone. He must not have seen me in the shadows. Yeah, he said, laughing softly. The kid's voice is incredible. Pause. Trust me, Vanessa. With the right investment, she could make serious money. Another pause. No, Linda's thinking about it. She'd be crazy not to. My chest tightened. He wasn't talking about a daughter. He was talking about a product. A business plan. He hung up the phone and walked back toward the street, never noticing I had heard everything. I stood there in the dark for a long time. The cool night air finally cleared my head. When I went back inside, I looked at the folder again. And I made a decision. The next morning I called Mark. He answered on the second ring. Well? I took a breath. Let's talk about your offer. There was a pause. Then I heard him smile through the phone. Good, he said. But what Mark didn't realize was that the conversation he thought he was starting was actually the trap he was walking into. The next morning after I hung up with Mark, I drove straight to a small brick office building near downtown Springfield, just a few blocks from the courthouse. The sign on the door read, Patel Family Law. Inside the waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. There were 2 leather chairs against the wall and a framed photo of the Springfield skyline. A woman at the desk looked up. Can I help you? I have an appointment with Susan Patel. She nodded. She's expecting you. A minute later, a woman in her early 50s stepped out of the hallway holding a legal pad. Short black hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain. She smiled warmly. Linda Carter. That's me. She gestured toward her office. Come on in. Susan Patel's office was simple but comfortable. Bookshelves filled with law books lined one wall, and a window overlooked a parking lot behind the building. She motioned for me to sit. So she said, flipping open a folder, Tell me what your ex-husband wants. I slid Mark's paperwork across the desk. She read silently for a moment. Then she leaned back in her chair. Well, she said calmly, this is bold. That bad? She shook her head. For him, yes. For me, she smiled slightly. Possibly very good. I explained everything. Mark leaving. The empty bank account. 9 years of silence. And now the sudden interest in our daughter. Susan listened without interrupting. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the desk. First question, she said. Has he paid any child support? Not once. Her eyebrows lifted. Not even a partial payment. Number. She nodded slowly. That's already interesting. She opened her laptop and typed a few notes. In Missouri, she explained 9 years of absence can legally qualify as parental abandonment. My heart skipped. What does that mean? It means he's starting this case from a very weak position. For the first time since Mark showed up in that grocery store parking lot, I felt a small flicker of relief. But Susan wasn't finished. There's another issue, she added. What? She turned the laptop toward me. Your daughter's income. Emily had been earning small amounts from performances and online music streams. Nothing life-changing, but enough that it showed potential. Susan folded her hands. If your ex-husband gains custody or even partial guardianship, he could potentially gain control over those earnings. My stomach dropped. So he could take her money. In certain circumstances, yes. That's when the whole situation clicked into place. Mark didn't want a relationship. He wanted control. Control of the opportunity Emily represented. Susan studied my face. What do you want to do? For a moment I didn't answer. I thought about Emily singing at church. I thought about the way Mark had laughed on the phone the night before. The kid's voice is incredible. Like she was livestock at an auction. I took a breath. I want to hear his offer. Susan tilted her head slightly. You mean negotiate? Yes. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Then she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Good. She tapped the folder with one finger. Because I have a few ideas. That evening, I picked Emily up from choir practice at First Baptist Church. The sun was just starting to set, painting the sky pink and gold above the parking lot. Emily climbed into the passenger seat of my old Honda Civic, still holding her sheet music. How was practice? I asked. Good, she said. Mr. Alvarez says the fall concert might be bigger this year. That's great. She buckled her seatbelt and looked at me carefully. Kids notice more than we realize. Mom, are you okay? I forced a smile. Why wouldn't I be? She shrugged. You seem quiet. I hesitated. Then I decided not to lie completely. Your dad came back to town. Emily didn't react the way I expected. She just stared out the window for a moment. Then she said softly, I figured. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. You did? She nodded. I saw him at the fair last month. That surprised me. He talked to you. Number. She shook her head. He just stood near the stage and watched. A strange chill ran down my spine. Emily continued quietly. Mom, why did he leave? The question hung in the air between us. I had spent years trying to protect her from that truth. But she wasn't a baby anymore. So I told her the simplest version. He wasn't ready to be a father. Emily nodded slowly. Then she said something that broke my heart a little. "That's okay." I looked at her. "It is," she smiled faintly. "I already have the parent I need." For a second I couldn't speak. I reached across the console and squeezed her hand. We drove home in silence after that. Later that night, after Emily went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table again. The same place where Mark had once emptied our bank account and walked out of our lives. But this time things were different. I had a lawyer. And a plan. Over the next few days, Susan and I gathered everything we could. Old bank records. Emails. Text messages. Anything showing Mark had walked away. One document stood out more than the others. An email Mark sent the week he left. It contained one line. "Don't make me look at that kid again." Susan printed it and slid it into the case file. That, she said, is going to matter. Meanwhile, Mark called several times. Each conversation sounded more confident than the last. "Vanessa's already spoken with a producer in Nashville," he told me during one call. "She's very serious about Emily's future." I kept my voice neutral. "That sounds impressive." "It is," he said. "This could be huge for her." For a moment he sounded almost excited. Like a talent scout discovering a new singer. "Think about it," he continued. "Real opportunities, real money." I let him talk. Because the more he talked, the more certain I became about what needed to happen. 2 weeks later, the court date was set. Jackson County Family Court. Kansas City. Mark texted me that morning. "Looking forward to working this out." Working it out. Like we were negotiating a business contract. He still believed the same thing he had believed 9 years earlier. That I was the weaker one. That eventually I would fold. What he didn't understand was that the woman he had walked away from no longer existed. 9 years of raising a child alone changes you. You learn things. You grow stronger. And sometimes, you learn exactly how to let someone think they're winning. Right up until the moment they realize they've already lost. We left Springfield before sunrise. Kansas City is about 3 hours from us if traffic behaves, and that morning the highway was still dark when I pulled onto I-44 with a thermos of coffee in the cup holder and Susan Patel in the passenger seat beside me. Neither of us talked much at first. The tires hummed against the road. The sky slowly lightened from black to deep blue. I had barely slept, not because I was unsure. By then I knew exactly what Mark was trying to do, and I knew what we had. No, I was awake most of the night because even when you're prepared, there's something about a courtroom that gets inside your nerves. The formality of it, the waiting, the way other people sit in judgment over the worst moments of your life. Susan must have sensed it. About halfway there, somewhere past Lebanon, she reached down into her briefcase and handed me a small pack of peppermint gum. "Chew one," she said. I gave her a tired look. "Is this legal strategy?" "It's anxiety strategy." I laughed despite myself and unwrapped a piece. That helped. A little. By the time we reached Jackson County, the city was fully awake, commuters on the roads, office buildings catching the morning light. We parked in a garage 2 blocks from the courthouse and walked the rest of the way in sensible shoes. I remember the sound of my heels clicking across the sidewalk. Sharp, steady. I kept thinking, just keep walking. Family court doesn't look dramatic the way it does on television. No polished mahogany everywhere, no grand staircase. Just fluorescent lighting, gray walls, metal detectors, worn benches, people carrying paper cups and file folders, and the tired look of folks who'd rather be anywhere else. We checked in and took seats outside the courtroom. Then Mark arrived. He looked expensive. Dark blue suit, polished shoes, one of those watches men buy when they want the world to know they've done well. Vanessa came in right behind him wearing a cream-colored blouse, a camel coat folded over one arm, and pearls at her throat like she was heading to lunch at a country club instead of a custody hearing. And trailing behind them were 2 lawyers. 2. That told me everything I needed to know about how they saw this day. They thought money and pressure were going to do the work for them. Mark spotted me and smiled. Actually smiled. Like we were meeting for brunch. "Linda," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Morning." I looked at him but said nothing. He cleared his throat and tried again. No need for this to get ugly. We can still be reasonable. Susan stood up beside me. Mr. Carter, if you have something to discuss, you can discuss it with me. His smile faded a little. Vanessa's eyes moved to Susan. And you are? Susan Patel, counsel for Ms. Carter. Vanessa gave a slow nod, the kind that says she has already decided what she thinks of you. Well, she said, I do hope this can be handled efficiently. Everyone's time is valuable. Susan didn't blink, especially the court's. That was the first moment I saw a crack in Vanessa's polished little shell. Very small. But it was there. Inside the courtroom it was colder than I expected. Over-air-conditioned like so many public buildings. I sat at our table and rubbed my hands together once under the desk. The judge entered a few minutes later. Judge Ellen Whitaker. Mid-60s, silver hair, reading glasses low on her nose, expression that gave away absolutely nothing. We all stood, then sat. The clerk read the case name. My heart was beating hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Mark's attorney went first, tall man, confident voice, expensive suit. He framed the whole thing the way I knew he would. A father seeking to reconnect, a child with unusual musical promise, a household with greater means and better professional opportunities. He even used the phrase best interests of the minor like it was a ribbon he could tie around the whole ugly thing and make it look respectable. Listening to him, you would have thought Mark was a concerned parent who had simply been delayed. Not absent. Not cruel. Not the man who had once looked at a 10-month-old baby and spoken about her like she was trash in the way of his new life. I sat still and let him talk. When he was done, Susan stood. She did not rush. That mattered. She adjusted her glasses, picked up a folder, and walked to the front with the calm of someone setting a clock to the correct time. Your Honor, she said, opposing counsel has described this case as a father seeking connection. The evidence will show something much simpler. Mr. Carter abandoned his daughter in infancy, provided no support for nearly a decade, made no meaningful effort to contact her, and has returned only after becoming aware of her earning potential. No drama, no raised voice. Just facts. You could feel the room settle. Susan presented the first exhibit, child support records. Or rather, the absence of them. 9 years. No payments. No gifts. No medical contribution, no school support, no birthday checks tucked into envelopes, nothing. The court clerk handed the documents to the judge. Susan stated the total amount owed with arrears and penalties. Current delinquency exceeds $182,000. The number seemed to land physically in the room. I watched Mark shift in his chair. Not much, just enough. Judge Whitaker looked over her glasses at him. Mr. Carter, she said, is this amount disputed? His lawyer leaned in, whispered something, then answered for him. We dispute portions of the calculation, Your Honor. Susan didn't miss a beat. We welcome a line-by-line review. That shut him up. The next exhibit was the bank record. The one I had stared at years earlier with my hands shaking at the kitchen table. Susan held it up. On the day Mr. Carter left the marital residence, he withdrew the remaining balance of the couple's joint savings account. Total amount $38,412. Judge Whitaker looked down at the document, then back up at Mark. Mark's jaw tightened. Vanessa sat perfectly still, but I noticed her fingers pressing together in her lap. Susan continued. At that time, the child was 10 months old. There was something deeply satisfying about hearing my real life spoken plainly in a room where nobody could interrupt me, charm me, or talk over me. Because when you strip people like Mark down to dates, documents, and numbers, they lose a lot of their shine. Then came Mr. Alvarez. He had driven up from Springfield that morning in a borrowed blazer and his good church shoes. He looked nervous when he took the stand, but once he started talking about Emily, his voice steadied. He told the court how long he had known her, where she performed, the work she put in, her discipline, her kindness, her love of music. Then Susan asked the question that mattered. In all the years you have known Emily Carter, have you ever seen her father at a rehearsal, recital, choir, service, school performance, or local event? Mr. Alvarez adjusted his glasses and answered clearly. No, ma'am, not once. Susan nodded. Have you ever heard Emily refer to him as an active presence in her life? Number. Has anyone besides her mother consistently supported and transported her to those events? No, ma'am, it's always been Linda. I looked down for a moment because if I had kept staring straight ahead, I might have cried. And I was not going to cry in front of Mark. Not that day. Mark's lawyer tried to recover during cross-examination. He asked about Emily's promised future prospects, the level of competition in the music industry. He wanted the conversation back on opportunity. But every answer kept circling back to the same truth. Emily's life, her talent, her confidence, those things had been built in the years Mark was gone. Built by routine, sacrifice, church basements, late-night drives home from school productions, small-town community support, a mother showing up again and again and again. No lawyer in a nice suit was going to erase that. Then Susan reached for the email. The room changed before she even read it. Maybe it was the way she lifted the paper. Maybe it was something in her voice. Your Honor, we move to admit correspondence sent by Mr. Carter to my client during the week he left the family home. Mark's attorney objected. Susan answered. The judge allowed it. Susan looked down at the page and read one sentence. Just one. Don't make me look at that kid again. The words hung in the courtroom like smoke. Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Even the clerk stopped shuffling papers. I looked at Mark. He had gone pale, not dramatically, just enough that the color had drained from his face and settled somewhere lower, somewhere meaner. He looked furious and embarrassed at the same time. Vanessa turned toward him slowly. That was the first moment I thought she might not have known everything. Or maybe she had known, but not in his own words. There's a difference. A story can be polished, a sentence like that cannot. Judge Whittaker lowered the page to the desk. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice flat, did you write this? Mark swallowed. Yes. Just that. Yes. No excuse attached. No explanation big enough to survive the light. Susan sat down. Then she touched my forearm once. Your turn. I stood and walked to the front. The room felt colder up there. My mouth was dry, but my voice came out steady. That surprised me. I looked at the judge, not at Mark. Your Honor, I'm not here because I wanted revenge. I'm here because my daughter is not something that gets discarded when she's inconvenient and claimed when she becomes valuable. I heard one of Mark's lawyers shift behind me. I kept going. 9 years ago, he left when she was 10 months old. He said he didn't want her. He emptied our savings and started over somewhere else. He did not raise her. He did not comfort her when she was sick. He did not show up for school programs or choir concerts or birthdays. He has no idea what size shoes she wore at 7 or what books she loved at 9 or how nervous she gets before she sings unless I squeeze her hand first. I paused then, just long enough. The judge was watching me closely. So when he comes back now with money and contracts and promises, I can only hear one thing. He does not want my daughter. He wants what she can produce. I turned my head slightly, then just enough to look at Mark. He wants her voice. And then I said the last part. And he wants her money. That did it. The whole room shifted. You can feel when a truth lands. It's almost physical. Judge Whittaker leaned forward and folded her hands. Mark's attorney stood up fast, launched into a speech about emotional characterizations and speculative motive. Susan rose too. Then let's discuss motive directly, Your Honor. She lifted one final folder. I already knew what was inside, but even so my pulse jumped. This court should also know, she said, that Emily Carter's performance income has already been secured under a trust arrangement administered independently for her sole benefit. Neither parent may access those funds for personal use. Mark turned so fast in his chair it almost looked like a flinch. What? The word slipped out before his lawyer could stop him. Susan continued calm as ever. The trust was established months ago on the advice of a financial planner after the child began earning performance and streaming income. Any claim that transfer of custody is necessary to manage or develop those funds is therefore moot. Vanessa's face changed. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't gasp or slam a hand on the table. She just went still. Very, very still. And that stillness told me everything. This had mattered to her. A lot. Mark leaned toward his attorney, whispering sharply. The attorney whispered back. The second lawyer joined in. It was the kind of frantic, low-voiced conference people have when the floor has disappeared under them, and they're trying to pretend it hasn't. Judge Whittaker looked down at the documents, then up again. Mr. Carter, she said slowly, you abandoned this child for 9 years, paid no meaningful support expressed in writing that you did not wish to see her, and now seek expanded parental authority after her talent becomes financially relevant. Is there some fact before me that improves this picture? Silence. Mark opened his mouth. Closed it. His attorney stood instead. Your Honor, my client would like a brief recess. The judge did not look impressed. You may have 10 minutes. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the whole performance finally cracked. Mark came through the doors first, red-faced and breathing hard. Vanessa was behind him, tight-lipped, furious in that controlled, rich person way that somehow feels colder than yelling. He stopped a few feet from me. You set me up. I stared at him. No, Mark, I said, I just kept records. His face twitched. Vanessa turned to him. You told me that email was exaggerated. So she had known. Just not how ugly it sounded. Mark lowered his voice. Now is not the time. Her eyes flashed. No, I believe now is exactly the time. Susan stepped slightly in front of me, not dramatic, just enough to remind everyone where the line was. Mark pointed at me. You could have handled this privately. I laughed once, I couldn't help it. Privately, you offered me money for custody in a grocery store parking lot. He looked like he wanted to say something cruel, something big, something that would restore the old balance where he was the one in control. But the problem with public humiliation is this: once it happens, people see you clearly, and there is no easy way to gather yourself back up. When the bailiff called everyone in again, Mark's shoulders looked heavier. Older. Smaller. Back inside, his attorney announced they were withdrawing the custody petition. Just like that. No more speeches, no more promises about Nashville or opportunities or best interests. Done. Judge Whitaker made a few final statements for the record, none of them flattering to Mark, and reminded counsel that child support arrears remained a separate matter the court was prepared to address. That was another little twist of the knife. By the time it was over, Vanessa was already halfway to the exit. She never looked at me again. Mark did. One last time. Not angry now, not exactly. More like stunned. As if he still couldn't understand how the woman he'd left in a small house off Glenstone Avenue had turned into the person who just destroyed his plan in open court. The answer was simple. He had given me 9 years to learn how. Outside the courthouse, the air felt warmer, real again. I stood on the sidewalk and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since the day he walked out. Susan touched my arm. You did well. I nodded. Then I laughed, a little shaky this time. I think I might throw up. She smiled. That's normal too. A few minutes later, I called Springfield. Emily answered on the second ring. Mom? It's over, I said. There was a pause. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Are we okay? I looked up at the bright Kansas City sky, at people hurrying past the courthouse, at the life moving on around me. Yes, I said. My voice broke a little then, just a little. We're okay. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew that was true. The drive back to Springfield felt quieter than the drive up. Not heavy quiet, not nervous quiet. Just calm. The kind of quiet you get after a storm passes and the sky clears and you realize the house is still standing. Susan rode with me as far as Lebanon before she had a colleague pick her up to return to Kansas City. We stopped at a gas station off the highway, bought coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, and sat on the curb for a few minutes, stretching our legs. She looked over at me and said, You know, most people expect revenge to feel dramatic. I smiled faintly. Didn't that qualify? She shook her head. No, dramatic would have been yelling, or slamming the table. What you did was worse. How so? You let the truth do the work. I thought about that as I got back on the road. Maybe she was right. For years I had imagined what I might say if I ever saw Mark again. All the speeches, all the anger I might finally release. But when the moment actually came, none of that mattered. Because the facts were enough. I reached Springfield just before sunset. Emily was sitting on the front porch steps when I pulled into the driveway. She must have heard the car because she stood up immediately. How did it go? I stepped out of the car and walked toward her slowly. It's finished, I said. She studied my face carefully. Finished how? He dropped the case. Her shoulders relaxed a little. Then she asked quietly, "Are you okay?" That question hit harder than anything that happened in court. I laughed softly and opened my arms. She walked straight into them. I held her tight for a long moment. "Yeah," I said into her hair, "I'm okay." Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. But it became peaceful. Mark never contacted us again about custody. His lawyer sent one formal notice confirming the petition had been withdrawn. After that, silence. There was still the matter of child support arrears, which the court continued to process. Susan handled that quietly in the background. I didn't think about it much. Some things matter less than they once did. Emily kept singing. Fall arrived, and with it came the church concert Mr. Alvarez had been planning for months. The sanctuary was packed that night. Families, neighbors, people from nearby towns who had heard about the girl with the powerful voice. I sat in the back pew like always. When Emily stepped up to the microphone, the room fell completely silent. She looked older now, more confident. But when she started singing, I still saw flashes of the little girl who used to climb into my lap and hum off-key lullabies after my night shifts. Her voice filled the church. Strong, clear, honest. When the last note faded, the whole place erupted in applause. Emily smiled shyly and glanced toward the back of the room. Toward me. And in that moment, I realized something. Mark had thought he was returning to claim something valuable. What he never understood was that the value had never been the talent. It was the life built around it. The years. The work. The love. None of that was for sale. A few months later, Emily turned 18. She had already received several offers from music programs in bigger cities. Nashville. Austin. Even one in Los Angeles. But one evening she came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes and said something that surprised me. "I think I want to stay here a little longer." I dried my hands and looked at her. "Why?" She shrugged. "I like singing here, at church, at the festivals. People know me." Then she added with a small smile, "And I like being close to you." My throat tightened. "You don't have to stay because of me." "I'm not," she said. "I'm staying because this is home." That was the moment I knew something else, too. Whatever Mark had tried to take from us all those years ago, he had failed. Completely. The strange thing about revenge is that people expect fireworks. They imagine dramatic speeches and perfect endings. But real life is quieter than that. Real victory doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's simply the moment you realize someone no longer has power over you. For me, that moment happened in a kitchen. Not a courtroom. A few weeks after the case ended, I started volunteering with a small support group at church for single mothers. Nothing official. Just a few women sitting around a table on Thursday nights sharing stories and advice. Some of them were where I had been years earlier, scared, overwhelmed, trying to figure out how to raise children alone. One of them asked me once, "How did you get through it?" I thought about that for a minute. Then I told her the truth. You just keep showing up. Day after day. Meal after meal. School pickup after school pickup. You keep showing up. And eventually you look around and realize you built a whole life in the space someone else abandoned. About 6 months after the court hearing, I received one last message from Mark. It came through email late at night. Just one sentence. "Maybe we could start over." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not angrily. Just calmly. Some doors stay closed for a reason. These days my life is simple. Work at the clinic. Choir rehearsals. Sunday lunches. Emily still sings, and sometimes when I hear her voice floating through the house while she practices, I pause whatever I'm doing and just listen. Not because I'm thinking about contracts or producers or opportunities, but because it reminds me of something important. 9 years ago, a man walked out of our house thinking he had taken everything with him. What he never understood was that the most valuable things were the ones he left behind. My daughter, my dignity, and the quiet life we built together. And sometimes that kind of peace is the richest revenge there is. If this story meant something to you, feel free to share your thoughts below. And if you've ever had to rebuild life after someone walked away, just remember you're stronger than you think.